born on September 6, 1814 in St. Anthony, Canada East, which is nowadays Quebec. Being born and growing up in a wealthy family, it meant George's early life was not necessarily hard. Coming from a family of grain exporters and millers, it was a family legend that they were descendants from the family of Jacques Cartier, who was a famous French explorer, known for being the first European to navigate and map the St. Lawrence River. From research we can assume that it's true, as George's father was named Jacques Cartier III. His mother was Marguerite Paradis, and he had one sibling, a brother named Frank Damien Cartier. George attended College de Montreal from 1824 to 1831. In 1835, he was called to the bar, a regulatory body for practice advocates. As he dove down the deeper root into politics, he soon encountered the rebellions of 1837-38, where he successfully drove the British regulars out and narrowly escaped, later going into exile in the state of Vermont. He later petitioned to return and practice law in Montreal. Now active in politics, he worked his way up to being brought to cabinet, which is a system of government. The cabinet is a committee of ministers that hold executive power. About 10 years later, he met John A. Macdonald, and together they allied as George led and was head of the political party, Parti Bleu. One of his accomplishments in his time of Parti Bleu was helping convince Queen Victoria to pick Ottawa as capital of Canada. He believed it best due to its high defensive military quality, and it was right en route for the railway connecting them to the Pacific in the Northwest. We used this information to lead up to the main topic, Confederation. The idea of Confederation was brought to life by John A. Macdonald, George Etienne Cartier, and George Brown, another politician and writer from Canada West, running the Federal Party. They thought this to be the best solution to the U.S. threats or Fenian raids, problems they were all facing. The threats from the USA were definitely scaring the peoples of Canada. The term manifest destiny, meaning the idea some U.S. citizens had, in which they believed that they were better than Canada and had the right to claim their land, was on its own a threat. The geographical land size of Canada compared to the defenses made it an easy infiltrating target. The fear of annexation was a main part in the idea. And then there were the Fenian raids. The Irish, also known as the Fenians, didn't approve of British rule over many lands, including their own. So, some of them formed a secret group. Some members who had been serving in the American Civil War were now planning attacks on British North America, or Canada, hoping to take citizens hostage and get Britain to give them control of their own land back. An alliance was formed between George Etienne Cartier, George Brown, and John A. Macdonald, but why? Let's see what Miss Shaw has to say.
The Unlikely Alliance formed in June of 1864. Why do you think the Unlikely Alliance was formed?
I believe that the Unlikely Alliance formed because of John A. Macdonald and George Brown's belief that they should be joining together in hopes to have a federal union for Confederation. They put their differences aside about what they believed about eliminating French culture or not in order to have this creation of a federal union.
And how do you think George Etienne Cartier was involved in that?
George Etienne Cartier was very important because he aligned and had the same ideas as John A. Macdonald, even though he was more on the political side of George Brown. So he put his differences aside of what he believed in with George Brown in order to align with the French because he was of French background as well.
Thank you, Miss Shaw, for that well-worded explanation. Once George Brown, George Etienne Cartier, and John A. Macdonald were all united, they formed the idea of Confederation. The colonies joined to make one big country, but still have their own government. It seemed like the perfect plan. But to convince the others to join was harder than they might think. Skeptic for all their own reasons, places like the East Coast with Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, or the West with New Caledonia, or nowadays, BC, or the Northwest Territories were really hard to convince. Of course, each colony had their own problems too. The colony that George led, Kent East, was skeptic of Confederation because the majority of them were French and feared the loss of their culture and identity due to George Brown's beliefs. They agreed when George Etienne Cartier assured them there was their only hope for survival and brought the term manifest destiny that I mentioned before. He also told them about the Great Coalition, the alliance to make a better future. He told them that it was a regional and federal government system. There would be the Federals, who are the joint colonies leaders in which he was a part of, so he could give them a voice, and the regionals, meaning that they would have a local government to refer to them as a French colony in specific. Though the creation of Confederation took time, George attended all three conferences to make it possible: the Charlottetown Conference in September 1864, the Quebec Conference in October 1864, and the London Conference in December 1866. I think it is safe to say that George, Etienne, and Cartier played a key role in Confederation. Now here are some fun facts plus some things that happened after Confederation. Here's Charlotte to talk about what the most interesting thing she found in her research was.
What do you think the most interesting thing you found in your research about him was?
The most interesting thing about George Cartier that I found in my research was that he wrote a song similar to O Canada, and that could have been the inspiration leading to the song we know, O Canada.
This is true. After college, while doing other political things, he composed a song titled O Canada, Mon Pays des Amours, which could have been the inspiration for the national anthem, O Canada. It shows us his taste in music. Now here are some things that happened after Confederation. Something I forgot to mention before, a big advantage of Canada East off of Confederation was the intercolonial railway being built. They no longer had to trade with the U.S. as the Reciprocity Treaty was cancelled, making it hard to find goods for a good price. The railway would fix that problem. It continued to be an advantage after Confederation because George, Etienne, and Cartier, being all in on the railway, made good connections with the British railway builders. Lastly, during the first few years of Confederation, George Cartier would fill in for John A. Macdonald in sickness or absence, proving that the alliance or bond is still holding strong. That is the end of this documentary about George Etienne Cartier. I hope you learned something and thank you for listening.